What is the perfect time to buy a house? That's a question that everyone would love to know the answer to. That's probably one of the most common questions that I get. So today I want to give you 5 indicators that it may be the perfect time for you to buy a house. So indicator number 1 that it might be the perfect time for you to buy a house is that you have a steady income. Buying a house is a really big commitment, and you're telling someone, hey, I'm going to pay you a monthly payment on time every month for the next 30 years. That's a big commitment. So it's very important that you find a job or a place that you can continue to create that same income over and over again so that you're not stressed about buying a house. The last thing you want to do when you buy this beautiful home is be stressed out and be house poor and not even get to enjoy it. Indicator number 2, that you have an emergency fund set aside. Houses are really expensive, and I think it's important for you to have some money set aside in case something breaks down in a home. There's things like roof that can have a leak, HVAC systems, your heating and cooling that can go out, leaving you either super hot or super cold. Your hot water tank can go out, just an array of things that could happen to you, even including appliances going out on you. So I think it's super important to have a little bit of money set aside for a rainy day during this time. A lot of times you'll hear that having around 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved up is a great emergency fund. I love this idea because it doesn't give you necessarily one set number that everyone should abide by, like $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. It really gives you something that's more attentive to your lifestyle. So if your home is, $2 million, you should have a much bigger emergency fund set aside than a house that's maybe $250. So I love that, but I think another indicator for you that this is the right time for you to purchase a house, that you have an emergency fund. And number 3, having 10% of the down payment saved. Now, hear me out. I know you can get into a house for less, and a lot of times you hear 20% being thrown around as what you need to get into a house, so you don't actually need 20%. People can get into a home as little as 0 money down with your rural development loans or your VA loans, or if you go the FHA route, maybe as little as 3% down. But I really like the 10% mark personally for me, because I think having, save that other 10% you maybe could invest or do some things at your house that increases that value. But I do like 10% a little bit more than the 3 and 5%, because it shows a little bit more diligence of managing your finances for a little while. In addition to this, if for some reason, hopefully this never happens to you, but you had an emergency and need to sell, typically it's going to cost you at least 6% of your real estate fees for realtors, for the buyer side and the seller side. So off the top, if you're into this house for 3% and say you need to sell in 2 years, it may not have appreciated too much, and you're hit with a 6% selling fee. I really just like that 10% mark because it gives you a little bit of cushion in case there were to be an emergency or something like that. You're not completely upside down. You wouldn't walk away with as much as you put into it for sure, but it still gives you a little bit of wiggle room. That's why that's number 3 for me. Number 4, that you now have a credit score of 670. And I like this because number 1, again, like we talked about in the last point, it shows a little bit of time that you've put into it. You've been working hard, you're managing your money, you're paying things on time, you're bringing your debt down. I really love that about the 670 score. It puts you into that good category on the FICO score, which also helps with your rate. And I think a combination of all that together makes for a really good position for you to look to buy a house. And the 5th and final indicator that this might be the perfect time for you to buy a house is that you are planning to stay in the area for 3 to 5 years. I think this is a really good mindset to have, that you're not just thinking about being there for a year or 2 years. Really, I think a home, the best way that this works for you is to have a kind of a long-term plan or medium to long-term plan. When a lot of people want to know about, renting versus purchasing, and I think really, if you're there in that 5-year mark or plus, I think that's really where the value is big for you. You've got appreciation. You have paid down the loan a little bit, not a lot, but I think there's something to this that adds some equity for you and value, versus if you're not planning to be there for very long. A lot of times I recommend to people that this may not be the time to buy for you, just because there are expenses that could come up. Every time a faucet leaks or a fence needs to be fixed, that's on you. you're paying taxes within your mortgage payment every year. There's just so many things that maybe you could save some money on unless you plan to stay there for a good amount of time. So that's why it's number 5 for me. Again, like we talked about in one of the previous points, if you were to sell again, you are paying 6% typically in real estate fees, 3% to the buyer side, 3% to the seller side. And if you haven't built equity up and you haven't been there for very long for that to appreciate, that could cause a problem when you go to sell. So for me, that was my 5 tips or indicators of when you would know this is probably the perfect time for you to buy a home. I know you're probably thinking that this conversation was going to go to interest rates, but there's advantages and disadvantages on both sides of the rates. On low rates and higher rates, of course, there's more advantages when they're lower rates, but I think there's an opportunity for you to maybe purchase at a price that is better to you, get some closing costs and things like that when the rate is a little bit higher. So for me, these are really the indicators, and it's more about you and where you're at in your life versus where the economy is at, because no matter where you're at, I think you could handle some of those storms that come with the economy a little bit better if you have stability in your life specifically and you're not waiting on the economy. So thanks for watching this one. I hope to bring more content to you guys. Great stuff. I want to help you learn about real estate and hopefully achieve that dream of buying your home or selling a home to purchase your dream home. So keep with me and I'll talk to you guys soon.